The morning sun was just starting to peek through the thick fog as David laced up his running shoes. He loved this time of day when the world felt quiet and peaceful. The small coastal town was still asleep, and he had the beach all to himself. This was his favorite part of living near the ocean, these quiet moments before the world woke up. David had been running this same route for 3 years now. He knew every rock, every curve in the path, and every sound the waves made against the shore. As a scientist who studied ocean life, he felt more at home by the water than anywhere else. The salty air filled his lungs as he started his morning jog along the cliff path. The fog was thicker than usual today, rolling in from the Pacific like a gray blanket. David could barely see 20 feet ahead of him, but he knew the path by heart. His footsteps echoed softly on the wooden walkway as he made his way toward his favorite spot, a rocky area where he often stopped to watch the sunrise. As he rounded the familiar bend, there was splashing coming from the tide pools below, but it wasn't the usual gentle lapping of waves. This sounded different, urgent, almost frantic. Out. David slowed his pace and listened carefully. The splashing continued, followed by what sounded like a soft cry. His heart rate picked up. Not from running, but from concern. Living by the ocean, David knew that marine animals sometimes got trapped in the tide pools during low tide. He had rescued several seals and sea lions over the years, and the sound below definitely indicated something was in trouble. David carefully made his way down the rocky slope, using his hands to steady himself on the wet stones. The fog made everything slippery and dangerous, but he moved with the confidence of someone who had done this many times before. The splashing grew louder as he got closer to the water's edge. What he saw next made him stop in his tracks. In the shallow pool between 2 large rocks, something was struggling in the water. At first glance, it looked like a large marine animal, maybe a dolphin or a small whale that had been caught by the receding tide. But as David got closer, he realized this was unlike anything he had ever seen. The creature had a human-like shape, but its skin was pale and seemed to shimmer in the dim morning light. It was wearing what looked like a tight-fitting suit made of material he didn't recognize. The being's movements were weak, like it was exhausted from fighting against the water. David's scientific mind tried to process what he was seeing. This couldn't be human. The proportions were all wrong. The limbs were longer and more graceful than any person he had ever seen. But there was something unmistakably intelligent about the way it moved, something that told him this wasn't just an animal in distress. As he stepped closer, the creature noticed him. It turned its head, and David found himself looking into the most unusual eyes he had ever seen. They were large and dark, filled with what he could only describe as intelligence and desperation. Despite the alien appearance, David recognized the universal language of someone in need of help. Without hesitation, David waded into the cold tide pool. The water was deeper than it looked, reaching up to his chest. The creature didn't try to swim away from him, which surprised him. Instead, it seemed to be reaching toward him, as if asking for help. David carefully wrapped his arms around the being, surprised by how light it felt despite being nearly as tall as him. The skin was cool to the touch and had an unusual texture, smooth but somehow different from human skin. The creature's breathing was shallow and rapid, and David could tell it was in serious distress. Getting both of them out of the tide pool was more difficult than David had expected. The rocks were slippery, and he had to be careful not to hurt the creature while climbing back up to the path. By the time he reached solid ground, both of them were breathing heavily. David quickly removed his jacket and wrapped it around the being. Whatever this creature was, it was clearly suffering from the cold. He needed to get it somewhere warm and safe, but where could he take something like this? The hospital would create chaos. He wasn't even sure if this being could survive in a normal medical environment. Then he remembered his research station. It was a small cabin about half a mile down the coast where he kept his equipment, and sometimes stayed overnight during his ocean studies. It was private, warm, and had everything he might need to help someone recover from cold water exposure. David carefully lifted the creature in his arms and began the walk to his cabin. The being's eyes remained open, watching him with what seemed like curiosity mixed with gratitude. Occasionally, It would make soft sounds that almost sounded like it was trying to speak. But the words weren't in any language David recognized. The fog was starting to lift as they reached the research station. David fumbled with his keys, trying to unlock the door while still holding the creature. Once inside, he gently placed the being on the couch and quickly started a fire in the small fireplace. The warmth of the cabin seemed to help immediately. The creature's breathing became more regular, and some color returned to its pale skin. David brought blankets and made some hot tea. Not sure if the being could drink it, but wanting to offer something warm and comforting. As the morning progressed, David found himself sitting across from the most extraordinary discovery of his life. The being seemed to be recovering, occasionally sipping the tea and watching David with those intelligent, curious eyes. When it tried to speak, David caught glimpses of words that sounded almost like English, but with an accent unlike anything he had ever heard. David's mind raced with questions. What was this creature? Where did it come from? How did it end up in the tide pool? More importantly, what was he supposed to do now? He had stumbled upon something that could change everything humanity knew about life in the universe. And it had all started with what he thought was a simple animal rescue during his morning run. The creature seemed to sense his confusion and reached out with one long, graceful hand to touch his arm. The gesture was gentle and reassuring, as if it was trying to tell him that everything would be okay. In that moment, David realized that his quiet morning jog had just become the beginning of the most incredible adventure of his life. 3 days had passed since David brought the mysterious being to his research station. During this time, he had watched something incredible happen. The creature he had rescued was healing at an unbelievable rate. What should have taken weeks was happening in just days. Her skin, which had been pale and cold, now had a healthy glow. Her breathing had become steady and strong. But the most amazing thing was how quickly she was learning to speak English. On the first day, she could only make sounds and point at things. By the second day, she was saying simple words like water and thank you.
Ow.
On the third day, she was having actual conversations with him. David had been careful to keep her presence a secret, told his colleagues at the Marine Research Center that he was taking a few days off to work on personal projects. He bought extra food and supplies, making sure no one would have any reason to visit his cabin. The last thing he wanted was for someone to accidentally discover what he had found. "My name is Lyra," she said one evening as they sat by the fireplace. Her voice was soft and musical, with an accent that sounded like nothing David had ever heard before. "I want to thank you for saving my life." David nearly dropped his coffee cup. This was the first time she had spoken her name clearly. "Lyra," he repeated, testing the sound. "That's a beautiful name. I'm David," she smiled. And David noticed that her smile was both familiar and completely foreign at the same time. "David," she said, pronouncing each syllable carefully. "You are a good person, David? Most of your kind would have run away from me?" "My kind?" David asked, though he was already beginning to suspect what she meant. Lyra looked out the window at the ocean, her large dark eyes reflecting the firelight. "I am not from your world, David. I come from a place very far away, beyond the stars you see at night." Even though David had suspected this, hearing her say it out loud made his heart race. "You're from another planet?" she said simply. "My home is a world covered mostly by water, much like yours. But our oceans are clean and healthy. We have learned to live with the water, not against it." David set down his coffee and leaned forward. As a scientist, he had always wondered if life existed elsewhere in the universe. Now he was sitting across from proof that it did. "Why are you here on Earth, I mean?" Lyra was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was sad. "My people have been watching your world for many years. We have been studying your oceans, your climate, your way of life. What we have found is very troubling." "What do you mean? Your oceans are dying." "David, the pollution, the warming, chemicals you put in the water, it's all connected to something much bigger than you realize." Lyra stood up and walked to the window. "The damage you're doing to your oceans is creating ripples that spread far beyond your world." David felt a chill that had nothing to do with the evening air. "What kind of ripples?" "In space, everything is connected by invisible currents, like rivers you cannot see. Your oceans are part of a vast network that connects many worlds. When you pollute and destroy your waters, it affects other planets too, including mine. This was beyond anything David had ever imagined. So your people sent you here to study us? Yes, but not just to study. Lyra turned back to face him, and David could see pain in her eyes. I was sent here to gather information so my people could decide what to do about the problem. What kind of decision? Lyra sat back down, her hands folded in her lap. My people believe that humans are not capable of changing. They think you will continue to destroy your oceans until there is nothing left. They have developed a plan to stop you before the damage spreads to other worlds. David's mouth went dry. What kind of plan? They call it the Great Correction. Using our technology, they can create massive waves that would wash over your coastal cities. It would force humanity to start over, to build a new civilization that respects the ocean instead of destroying it. That would destroy millions of people, David whispered. Billions, Lyra corrected. But my people believe it's necessary to save countless other worlds from the same fate. David stared at her in shock. And you were supposed to come back with information to help them decide whether to do this? Yes, I was supposed to return to my ship in 7 days with a complete report on human behavior and the state of your oceans. Based on what I found, my people would either proceed with the Great Correction or find another solution. But your ship crashed. Yes, and now I am trapped here. My people will come looking for me soon. When they do, they will want to know everything I have learned about humans. David felt overwhelmed. In just 3 days, his entire understanding of the world had been turned upside down. What will you tell them? Lyra looked at him for a long moment. That is what I have been trying to decide. Before I met you, I believed my people were right. I thought humans were selfish and destructive, incapable of change, but you saved me without asking for anything in return. You have cared for me and kept me safe. You have shown me kindness I did not expect. One person doesn't represent all of humanity, David said quietly. No, but you have made me wonder if my people might be wrong about humans. Maybe you are capable of change. Maybe there is another way. David realized the weight of what she was saying. How long do we have? My people will send a rescue team when I fail to return on schedule. That gives us perhaps 3 more days to find a solution. A solution to what? To prove that humanity deserves a chance to save itself. Show that humans can change before it's too late. Lyra reached out and took his hand. Will you help me, David? Will you help me find a way to save both our worlds? David looked into her eyes and saw hope mixed with desperation. In just 3 days, this being from another world had become more than just a scientific discovery. She had become someone he cared about, someone whose fate was now connected to the fate of every person on Earth. Yes, he said, I'll help you. But I don't know how we can possibly convince your people that humanity can change in just 3 days. Then we must find a way to show them, Lyra said. Because if we fail, the consequences will be greater than either of us can imagine. As they sat together in the flickering firelight, David realized that his simple morning jog had led to something much bigger than a rescue. It had led to a race against time to save 2 worlds. The next morning, David woke up with a strange feeling in his chest. For the first time in years, he felt like he had a real purpose, not just studying the ocean, but actually trying to save it. And he wasn't doing it alone anymore. Lyra was already awake, sitting by the window and watching the sunrise. She had this habit of getting up early to observe the sky, as if she was looking for something. David made coffee for both of them, though he noticed she preferred to drink it lukewarm rather than hot. I want to show you something, David said, pulling out his laptop. These are the studies I've been working on for the past 5 years. Lyra moved closer to look at the screen. David opened file after file, showing his research on ocean pollution, rising temperatures, and dying coral reefs. Each graph and chart painted a grim picture of what was happening to Earth's waters. This is exactly what my people have been observing, Lyra said softly, but your data is much more detailed than what we collected from space. The problem is, most people don't want to hear about this stuff, David explained. They think it's too depressing, or they believe someone else will solve it. Been trying to get people to care for years, but it feels like talking to a wall. Lyra was quiet for a moment, studying the data. On my world, we have tools that can show the true extent of damage. Would you like to see what I can see? David nodded, curious about what she meant. Lyra placed her hand on his arm, and suddenly, David felt something incredible happening. It was like his vision was expanding, showing him things he had never noticed before. Looking out at the ocean, David could now see invisible currents of pollution swirling through the water. He could see how chemicals from factories hundreds of miles away were affecting the water right outside his cabin. Most shocking of all, he could see tiny cracks forming in the ocean floor, like the earth itself was being damaged. These cracks, Lyra explained, are what my people call dimensional tears. They happen when the ocean becomes too polluted. Through these tears, the damage spreads to other worlds. David stared in amazement. This is incredible. No one on Earth can see this. If people could see what you're showing me, they would have to care. That's what I was hoping you would say, Lyra said with a small smile. Over the next few days, David and Lyra worked together like partners. She would show him things his instruments couldn't detect, and he would explain the scientific principles behind what they were seeing. They documented everything, taking notes and creating charts that showed the true scope of the ocean's problems. But it wasn't just work that brought them together. David found himself looking forward to their conversations in the evening. Lyra would tell him stories about her homeworld, describing cities that floated on clean blue oceans and people who lived in harmony with sea life. "We have gardens under the water," she said one night as they sat by the fire. "Imagine your most beautiful coral reef, but designed by intelligent minds to be even more magnificent. Children learn to swim before they can walk, and every person knows how to communicate with the creatures of the sea." "It sounds like paradise," David said. "It is in many ways. But it's also why my people are so afraid of what's happening here. They've worked for thousands of years to create that perfect balance. The thought of losing it because of damage from another world terrifies them." David understood her people's fear, but he also felt frustrated. Don't they realize that most humans would want to live like that too? I just don't know how. "That's what I'm beginning to understand," Lyra said. "Before I came here, I thought humans were naturally destructive. But watching you work, seeing how much you care about the ocean, I'm starting to think my people might be wrong." As they spent more time together, David noticed other changes too. Lyra had become more comfortable around him, laughing at his jokes and sharing her own thoughts freely. Sometimes he would catch her watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read, but it made his heart beat faster. One evening, as they were reviewing their research, Lyra suddenly stopped what she was doing. "David, can I ask you something personal?" "Of course." "Why do you care so much about the ocean? You could have chosen any career, but you dedicated your life to studying something most people ignore." David thought about it for a moment. "When I was a kid, my grandfather used to take me fishing. He would tell me that the ocean was like the Earth's heart, pumping life to every corner of the planet. He said that if we ever lost the ocean, we would lose everything. I guess I never stopped believing that." Lyra's eyes became very bright. "My people have a similar belief. They say that water is the blood of the universe, connecting all living things." "Maybe our worlds aren't so different after all," David said. "Maybe not," Lyra agreed, but then her expression became serious. "David, there's something I need to tell you. My people will send a rescue team tomorrow. I can feel their approach." David's heart sank. He had known this moment would come, but he wasn't ready for it. "What will you tell them?" "I don't know yet. I came here believing that humans were hopeless, but you've shown me something different. The question is, will my people believe what I tell them about you?" "What do you mean?" "They will want proof that humanity can change. One person's kindness isn't enough to save an entire species. They need to see evidence that humans as a whole are capable of protecting their oceans." David felt a surge of determination. "Then we need to show them. We need to find a way to prove that humanity can change." "How?" "I don't know yet, but we have to try. There has to be something we can do." Lyra reached out and took his hand. "David, even if we can't convince them, I want you to know that meeting you has changed me. You've shown me that there's goodness in humanity that my people don't understand." "David, felt something stir in his chest that he hadn't felt in years. It wasn't just respect or friendship. It was something deeper. Lyra, I need to tell you something too. These past few days with you have been the most meaningful of my life. You've shown me that my work actually matters, that there's hope for the future. They sat in comfortable silence, both understanding that tomorrow would bring changes neither of them was ready for. But for now, in this moment, they had found something unexpected in each other, a connection that crossed the vastness of space and the differences between their worlds. Outside, the ocean continued its eternal rhythm, unaware that tomorrow would determine the fate of billions of lives across the galaxy. David woke up to a strange humming sound. At first, he thought it was just the wind, but as he became more alert, he realized it was coming from something small and blue glowing on the table next to Lyra's bed. She was already awake, staring at the device with fear in her eyes. "What is that?" David asked, though he already suspected the answer. "My communication device," Lyra said quietly. "I thought it was destroyed in the crash, but it seems to be working again. My people are trying to contact me." The humming grew louder, and suddenly a voice filled the room. It spoke in a language David didn't understand, but he could tell from the tone that whoever was speaking was not happy. The voice was cold and commanding, nothing like Lyra's gentle way of speaking. Lyra responded in the same language, her voice shaking slightly. The conversation went back and forth for several minutes before the device went silent again. "What did they say?" David asked, though he was afraid to hear the answer. "They've been looking for me for 3 days. They know I'm alive and they want my report immediately." Lyra's hands were trembling as she spoke. "They're giving me until tonight to transmit my findings about humanity and the state of Earth's oceans." "What happens if you don't?" "They'll send a larger team to find me. And when they do, they'll scan my memories to get the information they need. They'll also scan yours and anyone else I've had contact with." David felt his blood run cold. "Can they do that?" "Yes. It's standard procedure when an agent goes missing. They'll learn everything about you, about this place, about how humans live. And based on what they find, they'll make their decision about the Great Correction." David stood up and began pacing around the small cabin. "So we have until tonight to figure out what you're going to tell them." "David, there's something else I need to tell you. Something I haven't been completely honest about." Lyra looked down at her hands. "The Great Correction isn't just about creating big waves to destroy coastal cities." "What do you mean?" "My people have the technology to trigger massive underwater earthquakes. These earthquakes would create tsunamis so large that they would reshape every coastline on Earth. Most of the world's population lives near the ocean." "So billions of people would die?" David finished. "Yes, but my people believe this is necessary. They think it's the only way to force humanity to start over and build a civilization that respects the ocean instead of destroying it." David sat down heavily in his chair. "And you were supposed to recommend whether they should do this?" "My mission was to study human behavior and assess whether your species is capable of change. If I report that humans are hopeless, they'll proceed with the Great Correction within days. If I report that humans can change, they might give you more time." "Might?" "The decision isn't mine alone. I'm just one voice among many. And most of my people already believe that humans are beyond saving." David felt overwhelmed by the weight of what she was telling him. "What do you believe, bro?" Lyra was quiet for a long moment. "A week ago, I would have said humans are hopeless. I came here expecting to find a species that was selfish and destructive, incapable of caring about anything beyond their own immediate needs. And now I've seen you risk your life to save a stranger. I've watched you dedicate your life to protecting something most people ignore. I've seen the pain in your eyes when you talk about the damage being done to the ocean." She stood up and walked to the window. "You've shown me that there's goodness in humanity that my people don't understand. But one person isn't enough to save an entire species," David said. "No, it's not. That's the problem. My people need proof that humans as a whole can change, not just individuals like you." David joined her at the window, looking out at the ocean that had brought them together. "What if we gave them that proof?" "How?" "I don't know yet, but there has to be something we can do." Some way to show them that humanity is worth saving. Lyra shook her head. David, you don't understand. My people have been observing Earth for decades. They've seen wars, pollution, environmental destruction. They've watched humans make the same mistakes over and over again. Why would they believe that anything has changed now? Because they haven't seen what I've seen, David said. They haven't seen the scientists who dedicate their lives to studying climate change. They haven't seen the activists who risk everything to protect the environment. They haven't seen the ordinary people who are starting to care about the future of our planet. But how can we show them that in just a few hours? David was quiet for a moment, thinking, what if we didn't just tell them about these people? What? If we could show them? What do you mean? I have contacts all over the world? Scientists, environmentalists, researchers. What if we could get them to coordinate something? Some kind of global demonstration that shows your people that humans are capable of working together to protect the ocean? Lyra looked at him with a mixture of hope and doubt. David, organizing something like that would take months, maybe years. We have hours. Then we need to think of something else. David felt desperation creeping into his voice. There has to be another way. There is, Lyra said quietly. But you won't like it. I could lie in my report. I could tell them that humans are already making significant progress in protecting the oceans. I could show them false data that makes it look like your species is changing. Would they believe it? Maybe for a while. But eventually, they would discover the truth. And when they do, the consequences would be even worse than before. What would happen to you? Lying in an official report is considered treason among my people. The punishment is exile. I would never be allowed to return home. David stared at her. You would give up everything for us? For people you barely know? I would give up everything for you, Lyra said softly. These past few days have shown me something I never expected to find. I found someone who cares about the same things I care about. Someone who makes me want to be better than I was before. David felt his heart racing. Lyra, I feel the same way, but I can't let you sacrifice everything for us. There has to be another solution. If there is, we need to find it soon. The device will activate again in 6 hours, and they'll expect my report. David looked out at the ocean, feeling the weight of billions of lives on his shoulders. Somewhere out there, Lyra's people were waiting for an answer that would determine the fate of everyone he had ever known. He had to find a way to save both worlds, but time was running out. We'll figure this out, he said, taking her hand. We have to. But as the hours ticked by, David couldn't shake the feeling that they were facing an impossible choice. Save humanity and lose the woman he was falling in love with, or save their relationship and watch the world burn. Either way, nothing would ever be the same again. With only 3 hours left before Lyra had to send her report, David suddenly had an idea that seemed completely crazy. But sometimes crazy ideas were the only ones that worked. Lyra, what if we didn't try to convince your people with words or fake data? David said, grabbing his phone. What if we showed them something real happening right now? What do you mean? I'm going to call every scientist, researcher, and environmentalist I know. I'm going to ask them to do something they've never done before, work together on a single project, starting today. Lyra looked confused. David, even if you could reach people, how could you organize anything meaningful in just 3 hours? You're right, 3 hours isn't enough to save the ocean. But it might be enough to show your people that humans can respond to a crisis when we understand what's at stake. David was already scrolling through his contacts. What if I told the world's top ocean scientists that we've discovered something that threatens all life on Earth? What if I told them? We need their help right now? You want to tell them about me? Not exactly. But I can tell them we've discovered evidence of dimensional tears in the ocean floor that could lead to a global catastrophe. It's the truth, just not the whole truth. David started making phone calls. The first few people he reached were skeptical. But as he explained what he had discovered using Lyra's abilities to see the invisible damage, their attitudes changed quickly. Word began to spread through the scientific community like wildfire. Dr. Chen in Tokyo was the first to respond. Within an hour, she had organized her entire research team to begin emergency monitoring of the Pacific Ocean. Dr. Rodriguez in Brazil followed, coordinating with research stations across South America. Dr. Peterson in Norway activated the entire European Ocean Monitoring Network. This is incredible, Lyra said, watching David coordinate what was becoming a global response. In my observations of humanity, I've never seen anything like this. That's because we've never had a reason to work together like this before, David explained, still making calls. Most of the time, countries and scientists compete with each other. But when the stakes are high enough, humans can do amazing things. As the hours passed, something extraordinary began to happen. Scientists from around the world started sharing data in real time. Research stations that had never worked together before began coordinating their efforts. Environmental groups that usually focused on small local projects suddenly found themselves part of a global network. The communication device on the table began humming again. It was time for Lyra to make her report. "David, I don't know what to tell them," she said, her voice filled with uncertainty. "Tell them the truth," David said. "Tell them what you've seen today." Lyra activated the device, and once again the cold voice of her commander filled the room. This time David could understand some of what was being said because Lyra was translating in real time. "Commander, this is Agent Lyra reporting on the status of human civilization in Earth's oceans," she began. "Agent Lyra, you are 3 days overdue. Explain your delay." "My ship was damaged during the mission. I have been conducting extended observation of human behavior from a ground position. What are your findings? Are humans capable of change? Or should we proceed with the Great Correction?" Lyra paused and looked at David. In her eyes, he could see her making a decision that would affect both their worlds. "Commander, I have observed something unexpected. Humans have indeed caused significant damage to their oceans. They appear to be capable of rapid coordination when faced with a true emergency." "Explain." "In the past 6 hours, I have witnessed the largest coordinated scientific response in human history. Over 200 research facilities across all continents are now working together to address ocean damage. They are sharing data, resources, and expertise in ways they have never done before." David held his breath. Lyra was telling the truth, but would her people believe it? "Agent Lyra, this seems highly unusual based on our previous observations of human behavior." "Yes, Commander. It appears that humans are capable of change when they understand the true consequences of their actions. They simply needed the right motivation." There was a long silence from the device. David could hear other voices in the background speaking. In Lyra's language, finally the commander spoke again. "Agent Lyra, we are detecting increased activity in Earth's research networks. Is this related to your observations?" "Yes, Commander. The humans have discovered evidence of the dimensional tiers we've been monitoring. Their response has been immediate and comprehensive." Another long pause. David felt like his heart was going to beat out of his chest. "Agent Lyra, based on your report, the Council has decided to postpone the Great Correction. We will give humans 1 full cycle to demonstrate sustained change in their ocean management practices. You will remain on Earth to monitor their progress." David felt his knees go weak with relief. They had done it. Somehow, they had convinced an alien civilization to give humanity a chance. "Understood, Commander. I will continue monitoring and report regularly." "Agent Lyra, be aware that this decision is controversial among the Council. Many still believe humans are incapable of lasting change. If their efforts fail or diminish, the Great Correction will proceed without further discussion." "Understand, Commander." The device went silent. For a moment, neither David nor Lyra moved. Then, suddenly, they were in each other's arms, holding tight as the weight of what had just happened sank in. "We did it," David whispered. "We actually did it." "You did it," Lyra corrected. "You showed my people something they had never seen before, humans working together for a common good." 6 months later, David and Lyra were working together at the newly established Global Ocean Recovery Center. The emergency response that David had organized in 3 hours had grown into the largest international environmental project in human history. Countries that had been enemies were now sharing resources to clean their oceans. Technologies that had been kept secret were now being used to heal the dimensional tiers in the ocean floor. Lyra had become humanity's first alien ambassador. though her true identity was known only to a select few world leaders. To everyone else, she was simply a brilliant scientist with revolutionary ideas about ocean conservation. "Do you ever regret staying?" David asked one evening as they watched the sunset from their research station. "Never," Lyra said, taking his hand. "I found something here I never expected to find." "What's that?" "Hope and love, and the understanding that sometimes the most important discoveries happen when you're trying to save someone else." David smiled, remembering that morning when he thought he was just rescuing a drowning animal. Instead, he had found the love of his life and helped save 2 worlds in the process. As they stood together watching the waves, both of them knew that their work was far from over, but they also knew that they would face whatever came next together, proving that love really could bridge the vast distances between worlds.